You learn pretty quick out here that the road has laws, and I'm not talking about the ones enforced by a state trooper with a radar gun. I'm talking about the real laws, the ones that are older than the interstates themselves, the unwritten code of the highway. It's a simple set of rules, but they're heavier than any load of steel you'll ever haul. You help a fellow driver with a set of chains. You flash your lights to warn the guy behind you about a bear hiding in the bushes. And the first, most important law, the one that's carved into the soul of every real trucker who's ever spent a lonely night on the blacktop, is that you do not, under any circumstances, pass a brother on the shoulder. You just don't. That code, it's the bedrock for a lot of the stories we share here. For those of you just climbing aboard for this run, my name is Jed. This is the place we make the miles fly by. A story to keep you company when the world outside your windshield is just a river of hypnotizing taillights. I'm glad to have you riding shotgun. This particular story starts on a stretch of road that feels purpose-built to test that code. The Texas Panhandle in the dead of a July afternoon. It's not a road, really. It's a sea of heat, a shimmering, black ocean of asphalt that reflects a sky so big and white and empty it feels like God ran out of ideas. The heat waves rise up in glassy, disorienting ribbons, making the horizon dance and wobble, playing tricks on a tired mind. It's a bully of a landscape. Its only purpose to wear you down, to cook the sense right out of your head until you're not sure if what you're seeing is real. But a broken down truck, that's no mirage. That kind of trouble is as real as it gets. I saw him from a good 2 miles out. He was just a smudge in the haze at first, a dark, wavering shape breaking up that long, perfect line where the blacktop met the sky. A ghost. As my old Kenworth ate up the distance, the ghost took form. It was a rig, an old Freightliner cab-over, pulled over onto the shoulder. Its hood was tilted forward, a gesture of complete and total surrender to the heat. And beside it stood a lone figure, a stick man in that vast, empty landscape, just standing there, getting cooked. My schedule was tight, hauling a load of industrial pipe to a site in Arizona. Dispatch was already breathing down my neck about the delivery time, but the code is the code. A man's life could be on the line out here. Without a second thought, I hit the Jake brake. The old girl roared in protest. The sound of the engine brake, a sudden thunderclap in the oppressive, buzzing silence of the plains. I eased her over onto the wide, dusty shoulder, kicking up a red cloud that swirled in the hot wind like a phantom. I pulled to a stop a good 50 yards in front of the Freightliner, giving him plenty of room, and set my brakes with a sharp, definitive hiss. When I opened my door, the heat was a physical blow, a solid wall of 110-degree air that sucked the breath right out of my lungs. The wind was a constant, a dry, low whistle that carried the sweet, hot smell of baking asphalt and the high insectoid drone of cicadas, the only living things stupid enough to be making noise in this furnace. I grabbed my half-gallon jug of water, screwed the cap on tight, and started the long walk back. The closer I got, the clearer the picture became, and the more my gut started to tighten. He was just a kid, couldn't have been a day over 20, and that was being generous. He was swimming in a greasy black t-shirt, his jeans stained with oil, his face pale and clammy under a smattering of acne and a thick sheen of sweat. He had the haunted, restless eyes of a stray dog, the kind of eyes that have seen way too much, way too soon. He looked lost, Not just broken down on the side of the road lost, but the kind of loss that starts deep inside and works its way out. And he looked scared, utterly terrified. "How we doin'?" I asked, keeping my voice calm and easy, the way you would with a spooked horse. He flinched when I spoke, a sharp, sudden jerk of his whole body. "Oh, hey," he stammered, his voice thin and reedy. He wiped a greasy hand on his jeans, a nervous, useless gesture. I think I got some bad fuel back at the last stop. She just died on me." He was trying to sound professional, like a real driver with a routine problem, but the performance was about as convincing as a $3 bill. I've heard 1,000 stories on the side of 1,000 highways. I know the rhythm of a true story, the feel of it. This wasn't it. This story was full of holes. A little puff of a dry laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. "Bad fuel, huh?" I said, walking past him to the front of his rig. "Let's have a look." I leaned over the hot fender and looked into the engine compartment. It took me all of 3 seconds to see the truth. The kid wasn't just a bad actor, he was a liar. It wasn't bad fuel. It wasn't a clogged filter or a faulty injector or any of the 100 small things that can go wrong out here. This was a catastrophe. A spider web of deep, ugly cracks ran across the engine block, a mortal wound in the heavy cast iron. Fresh, black oil was still weeping from the fractures, dripping down onto the sand, making a dark, ugly stain that looked like fresh blood. It was a fatal and very, very expensive heart attack. This engine hadn't just died. It had been murdered by neglect, run into the ground without mercy. I stood up straight and turned to look at the kid. He was standing there over the mechanical corpse of his truck, trying to tell me the victim had simply slipped in the shower. And I knew, with the kind of cold certainty that only comes from a lifetime on the road, that the real trouble out here on this blistering stretch of Texas blacktop had absolutely nothing to do with a broken-down engine. There's a certain kind of honesty between a man and a broken machine. You can't lie to it. You can't sweet-talk it. You can't spin it a yarn and hope it believes you. The steel tells the truth, plain and simple. I stood there in that suffocating heat, looking at the cracked engine block in the kid's truck, then back at the kid himself, and I knew for a fact that only one of them was telling me the truth. I decided right then to cut through the smoke. There's no point in dancing around a subject when you're both about to get heat stroke. I pointed a greasy finger at the spider web of cracks on the block. "Bad fuel, huh?" I said, letting the words hang in the hot, dry air. "Son, that engine has thrown a rod. It's not just broken, it's dead and buried. You could pour the purest diesel in the world into this thing, and all it would do is leak out onto the ground. This rig isn't going another inch under, in its own power, ever." The kid he'd told me his name was Cody just stared at the engine, his face going a shade paler, which I didn't think was possible. The tough guy act he'd tried to put on completely evaporated, and all that was left was that scared, lost boy. He looked like I'd just told him his dog died. "So," I said, crossing my arms, "let's try this again. Who do you drive for? What's your dispatcher's number? We need to call them. Get a wrecker out here to haul this thing to a graveyard." His eyes darted around, looking everywhere but at me. It's a small outfit," he mumbled, his voice barely a whisper against the constant whistle of the wind. "Out of Oklahoma. I'm pretty much the only driver. Don't really have a dispatcher." The alarm bell in my head, which had been ringing softly, now started to clang. No dispatcher? A one-man outfit driving a rig that looked like it had been around since the invention of pavement? The story was getting thinner, not thicker. My gaze drifted from the dead tractor back to the trailer hooked up behind it. It was an old, rust-streaked 53-foot box, but the doors were clean, and there was a brand-new heavy-duty bolt seal on the latch, the kind you use for a high-value load. "What are you hauling?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. He flinched, just a little, but I saw it. "Just machine parts," he said, looking away, down the long, empty stretch of highway behind us. "For a job in California. Machine parts," the classic answer. It's the trucker's equivalent of "I'm fine." It means nothing. And it's what you say when you don't want to talk about what's really in the box. But the way he said it, the way his eyes avoided mine, it felt like more than just a standard brush-off. It felt like another lie, stacked on top of the first one. I sighed, the hot air burning my lungs. "All right, kid, forget the company. What's your plan? You got a credit card? A company account? We can call a tow service, but they're gonna want a pile of money before they'll even put their truck in gear, especially for a haul out of the middle of nowhere." Cody just shook his head, his shoulders slumping in defeat. He looked down at his own empty hands as if they'd betrayed him. "No," he said, his voice cracking. "No cash. Cards are maxed out. No company account." Well, there it was, the whole ugly picture. A dead truck, a kid with a story full of holes, and not a dime to his name. Broke, busted, and stranded in the Texas panhandle. It's a bad hand to be dealt. But as I stood there, watching him, I noticed something else. His hands were shaking. Not a lot, but a steady, fine tremor, the kind you get when your nerves are shot to hell. And his eyes, he couldn't keep them still. Every few seconds, they'd flick up to his own side view mirror, then back down the road behind us, then to the mirror again. He wasn't just looking, he was watching. He was expecting something, or someone. My internal trouble sensor, a little piece of my gut that has saved my hide more times than I can count, wasn't just clanging anymore. It was screaming, a full-blown 5-alarm fire drill. This wasn't a breakdown. This was a situation. The code says you help a brother on the shoulder, but it doesn't say what to do when you think that brother might be hauling a load of trouble bigger than his trailer. I could have walked away then. I should have walked away. I could have said, "Sorry, son, that's too bad," and climbed back in my own rig. I could have called the highway patrol on the CB and let them handle it. That would have been the smart play. That would have been the safe play. But I looked at him, at this terrified, shaking kid who wasn't much older than my own grandson, and I saw a desperation so deep it was bottomless, and I just knew I couldn't do it. I couldn't leave him here to bake in the sun, to whatever fate was coming for him up that highway. Against every ounce of my better judgment, I made an offer. "Look," I said, my voice firmer now. "I can't leave you out here. The sun will cook you by nightfall. The next town is about 30 miles up the road. It ain't much, but it's got a diner and a motel. You can lock up your rig, grab your bag, and ride with me. We'll get some coffee, get you cooled off, and we'll figure it out." I expected him to look relieved. I expected a "thank you," a smile, something. Instead, a new wave of fear washed over his face. He looked from my truck to his truck and back to me, his mind racing, weighing a set of options I couldn't see. It was like I'd offered to rescue a drowning man by throwing him a live snake. Finally, after a long, tense moment, he just nodded, a single, jerky nod. "Okay," he whispered. He didn't look relieved. He looked like a man who had just traded one problem he couldn't solve for another, even bigger one that he couldn't even see yet. And as we walked toward my Kenworth, the heat shimmering around us, I had the distinct and uncomfortable feeling that I was in the exact same boat. The 30 miles to that next town felt like 1,000. The kid, Cody, sat in my passenger seat like a coiled spring, his hands clenched in his lap, his eyes glued to the side view mirror. He was a bundle of raw, twitching nerves. He jumped every time a car passed us, every time the CB crackled with static. The silence in the cab wasn't the comfortable quiet I'd sometimes shared with my grandson. This was a heavy, charged silence, the kind that feels like it's waiting for an explosion. I didn't push him for more of his story. You learn in this line of work that some things have to come out in their own time. A pressure cooker with no release valve is a dangerous thing. My job, as I saw it, was to find a place to let some of that steam off. The town, when we finally got to it, wasn't much more than a rumor. A handful of sun-bleached buildings huddled together on the vast, empty plains, looking like they were clinging to each other for survival. It was a wide spot in the road, a place you'd drive through 1,000 times and never remember. But it had what we needed: a gas station, a dusty motel, and a diner. The diner was a long, low building with a faded sign that just said, "Eat." Simple enough. I pulled the Kenworth into the gravel lot next to a couple of dusty pickup trucks, the big rig looking like a battleship docked next to a couple of rowboats. The moment we opened our doors and stepped inside was like diving into a cool, dark lake after a long day in a furnace. The air inside was thick and cool, smelling of old coffee, frying onions, and the faint, sweet scent of disinfectant. A big, ancient air conditioner in the window hummed and rattled, a beautiful, mechanical song of relief. It was a true oasis. For me, it was a moment of simple physical pleasure. For Cody, it seemed to only wind him up tighter. He scanned the room like a secret agent casing a joint. There were a couple of old ranchers at the counter, a family in a booth by the window, and a tired-looking waitress wiping down tables. Normal. But Cody saw threats everywhere. He slid into the booth at the very back of the room, the one in the darkest corner. And he didn't take the easy side. He squeezed himself into the inside seat, the one with his back pressed firmly against the wall, giving him a clear, unobstructed view of the front door. He was a cornered animal, looking for the first sign of the hunter. I sat down across from him, the vinyl of the booth seat cool against my legs. "Best seat in the house," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "You can see all the action from here." He just gave me a tight, nervous nod, his eyes already darting toward the front window, tracking a beat-up Ford that was rumbling past on the highway. He couldn't sit still. His leg was bouncing under the table, a frantic, jittery rhythm that was starting to make my own teeth ache. The waitress came over, a woman who looked as weary as the landscape outside. We ordered. I got a hot beef sandwich and a black coffee. Cody just ordered coffee. I convinced him to get some eggs, telling him he needed to put something solid in his stomach. Over the next 20 minutes, I tried to get his story straight. I did it the only way I know how. The gentle push. I told him a few of my own road stories, tales of breakdowns and bad luck, trying to build a bridge of shared experience to show him I was on his side. I remember one time, I told him, stirring my coffee, I ran out of money in Flagstaff, had to sell my spare tire to a four-wheeler just to get enough cash for fuel to get to Phoenix. My dispatcher nearly had a heart attack. You ever had to get creative to get out of a jam? He just shook his head, pushing his scrambled eggs around his plate with his fork. Not really. So this outfit you run for? I tried again. This one-man show. He must be a pretty trusting fella, sending a young guy like you out with a rig and a sealed load all on your own. He knows I'm a good driver, Cody mumbled, his eyes flicking back to the door. Every answer was a dead end. Every story he told had more potholes than a county road in the springtime. First, he was from Oklahoma. Then he mentioned growing up in East Texas. The machine parts were for a new factory. Then they were for an oil rig. It was like trying to nail Jell-O to a wall. The kid was lying, and he wasn't even very good at it. He was just throwing words out, hoping some of them would stick, that I would believe him enough to stop asking questions. I was about to try one more time when the little bell over the front door jingled. The bright, searing rectangle of the Texas sun filled the doorway, and for a second, all I could see was a silhouette. A big man, broad-shouldered, wearing a cowboy hat. As the door swung shut behind him and my eyes adjusted to the dim light, the silhouette resolved itself into a man in a tan uniform, a gold star glinting on his chest. The local county sheriff. And Cody. The kid flinched. It was an incredible thing to see. It wasn't just a startle. He flinched like he'd been shot. His back went ramrod straight against the vinyl booth. The fork clattered from his hand onto his plate, and all the color drained from his face, leaving him a pasty, sickly gray. It was the reaction of a man who had been running from the devil and had just heard the sound of hoofbeats right behind him. The sheriff took off his hat, revealing a full head of gray hair and a sun-beaten, weary face. He nodded a polite afternoon to the ranchers at the counter and gave a tired smile to the waitress. He was probably in looks, being his late 50s, a man who moved with the slow, deliberate pace of someone who understands that in this part of the world, the heat and the land will eventually wear everything down, and there's no point in hurrying to meet your fate. He saw me, sized me up in an instant, an old road dog just passing through, and gave me a simple, professional nod. Then his eyes settled on Cody. He wasn't a detective. He didn't have to be. He was a country sheriff. He knew the rhythms of his town, the faces of his people. He could smell trouble the way a farmer can smell rain, and the raw, unfiltered terror radiating from the kid in my booth was a stench you could probably smell from the street. The sheriff ambled over to our table, his boots making a slow, heavy sound on the linoleum floor. Every step was like a drumbeat, counting down to something terrible. He didn't loom over us. He just stood there, his presence sucking all the air out of our corner of the room, changing the entire atmosphere from a quiet meal to a silent interrogation. He hooked a thumb in his belt and looked down at Cody, his eyes not unkind, but full of a weary, bottomless certainty. "Afternoon, son," he said, his voice a low, calm drawl. "You're a long way from home, aren't you?" Cody was frozen solid, a statue carved out of pure fear. He just stared up at the sheriff, his half-eaten plate of eggs forgotten, his mouth hanging slightly open. The sheriff, Brody, didn't press him. He just waited, his patience as vast and empty as the plains outside. He let the silence do the heavy lifting. It's a trick old cops and old truckers both know well. If you wait long enough, people will eventually talk just to fill the quiet. "Got some ID on you, son?" Brody finally asked, his voice still that same low, unhurried drawl. "Driver's license? Logbook?" The questions were casual, but they landed on Cody like hammer blows. Each one was a test, a demand for legitimacy the kid clearly didn't have. I watched as Cody fumbled in the back pocket of his greasy jeans, his hands shaking so badly I was surprised he could get his wallet out. He pulled out a worn, cracked driver's license and handed it over. Then he reached for a crumpled, messy logbook on the seat beside him, the kind you buy for a few bucks at a truck stop. It wasn't the professional bound log of a real company driver. It was a cheap knockoff, and it was a mess. Brody took the documents and gave them a slow, deliberate look. He didn't need to run the name through a computer. He was reading the kid, not the plastic card. He was reading the shaky hands, the sweaty brow, the panicked, darting eyes. He looked from the license to Cody and back again. "Well, Cody," he said, handing the license back, "looks like you've had a bad run of luck today. I decided it was time for me to step in, to try and take some of the heat." "Sheriff," I said, my voice calm, "I found the kid out on 287, about 30 miles east. Engine blocks cracked wide open. He's in a real bind." Brody's eyes shifted to me. They were weary eyes, the eyes of a man who'd seen 100 kids just like Cody, all of them with a story, all of them in a bind that was usually of their own making. "I appreciate you stopping for him," he said, and it sounded genuine. Most folks wouldn't bother. He looked back at Cody, who seemed to shrink another 2 inches into the booth. "Happens out here. This heat is hard on old iron." He then laid out the official solution, the simple, by-the-book way to solve this little problem. "Here's what we can do," he said, his voice taking on a tone of simple logistics. "I can make a call, get the county wrecker out to your rig. We'll impound it, tow it to the county yard where it'll be safe and sound. Then I can drive you over to the bus station in Dalhart. There's a westbound that comes through around midnight. Get you on your way." It was a perfect, clean solution. A way to get the broken-down truck off the side of the highway and a stranded motorist to a place where he could get help. It was sensible. It was legal, and it was exactly what a peace officer is supposed to do. And for a kid who was broke and stranded, it should have sounded like a godsend. But at the mention of impounding the truck, a new kind of terror, a wild, cornered animal panic, flashed in Cody's eyes. It was a look of pure, absolute desperation. "No," he blurted out, the words sharp and loud in the quiet diner. "No, you can't do that. It's a misunderstanding. I just need to make a phone call to my boss. He'll wire me the money for a tow. I just need to make a call." He started talking too fast, the words tumbling over each other in a frantic rush to build a new wall of lies around himself. He was sweating freely now, his eyes wide and pleading. The sheriff just watched him, his expression unchanging. He'd seen this before too, This was the part of the story where the lies fall apart and the desperation takes over. He let Cody talk himself out. Then his gaze shifted from the panicked kid to me. He gave me a look. It was a look that didn't need any words. It was a look I'd gotten from lawmen in a half-dozen states over 40 years. It was a look that said, asterisk, this boy is trouble. He's spinning you a yarn, and you're getting yourself tangled up in it. This ain't your problem, old-timer. Walk away while you still can. Asterisk. It was a weary warning, a piece of professional courtesy from one old hand to another. He was giving me an out, a chance to step away from the mess before it got all over my boots. I just held his gaze and gave a slow, small nod. A nod that said, asterisk, I hear you. Asterisk Brody seemed to accept that. He knew he couldn't force me to be sensible. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a worn leather wallet, and dropped a few bills on the counter to pay for his coffee. Then he pulled out a small, simple business card and slid it onto our table, right next to the salt shaker. All right, son, he said to Cody, his voice back to its calm, even drawl. You try and get a hold of your company. The way he said the word, dripping with a quiet, profound disbelief, made it clear he knew there was no company. If you can't get a hold of him, and you find yourself still in a bind, you give me a call. He put his hat back on, gave me one last, final nod, and turned and walked out of the diner. The little bell over the door jingled his departure, and the bright, hot Texas sun flooded the room for a moment before the door swung shut again, leaving us in the cool, dark quiet. But the quiet wasn't a relief anymore. The sheriff's presence had been a weight, but his absence left behind something worse, a vacuum of pure, unadulterated tension. Cody sat there staring at the business card on the table like it was a live scorpion. He was shaking again, worse than before. The easy way, ring out, had just been offered, and he had refused it, and that told me everything I needed to know. Whatever trouble Cody was in, it was infinitely worse than a busted engine or an empty wallet. The law wasn't the solution to his problem. The law times was times his problem, and I was sitting right in the middle of it. We didn't talk on the drive back out of town. There was nothing to say. The kid had run out of lies, and I had run out of questions. The air in the cab was thick with the truth we both knew but hadn't spoken. He was in a world of trouble, and I had just made myself a part of it. We drove in silence, the sun dipping low and painting the vast, empty sky in bruised shades of orange and purple. We pulled up behind his dead rig just as the last of the light was bleeding out of the sky. The heat of the day was finally starting to let go, replaced by the cool, dry air of the desert night. I left my headlights on, their bright white beams cutting through the gathering dark, illuminating his broken-down truck in a stark, lonely spotlight. It looked like a monument to bad luck. I killed my engine, and the sudden quiet was absolute. No traffic, no town noise, just the ever-present whispering wind and the faint, high-pitched hum of a million unseen insects. We sat there for a long time, two strangers in a truck cab, surrounded by an ocean of darkness and silence. The pressure that had been building in him all day, the fear and the lies and the desperation, it had nowhere left to go. The dam had to break. And it did. It started with a sound, a small, choked gasp from the passenger seat. I looked over. The tough guy act, the nervous energy, it was all gone. It had all evaporated, and what was left was just a scared, heartbroken kid. His face was buried in his hands and his shoulders were shaking, racked with silent, tearless sobs. He was trying to hold it in, trying to be a man, but the weight was too much. The load he was carrying was too heavy. I didn't say anything. I just let him be. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for a man who's breaking down is to give him the dignity of a quiet witness. I just sat there, my hands resting on the steering wheel, listening to the sound of a young life coming apart at the seams. After a long while, the shaking subsided. He took a deep, ragged breath and wiped his face on the sleeve of his greasy t-shirt. He still wouldn't look at me. He just stared out the windshield at his dead truck, bathed in the glow of my headlights. "It's not stolen," he said, his voice a raw, broken whisper. Not yet, anyway. Not in a rush, but in a slow, painful trickle, like blood from a deep wound. The truck, he told me, belonged to his stepfather, a man who owned a small dirt-moving business back in East Texas, a man with a heavy hand and a mean streak a mile wide. The kid had been working for him since he was 16, eating his dust, taking his abuse, with nowhere else to go. He told me if I ever tried to leave, Cody said, his voice hollow, he'd make sure I had nothing, that I'd end up in a ditch. He said this truck, this piece of junk, was the only thing of value I'd ever touch. He was running. He wasn't hauling a load. He was escaping. He'd waited until his stepfather had left on a hunting trip, packed a single bag, and just left. He took the truck because it was the only thing he had. It wasn't an asset, it was a getaway car. His destination was a place in California, a town he'd only ever seen on a map. It was where his real father lived, a man he hadn't seen in 10 years, since his mother had left him for the man with the dirt-moving business. He didn't even know if his dad would want to see him. It was just a place to run to, a last desperate hope on the other side of the desert. "The load?" I asked, my voice quiet. "The machine parts?" He let out a short, bitter laugh. "It's junk," he said. "Just junk. Old tools, scrap metal, a couple of busted engine blocks from his shop. I sealed the trailer myself before I left. I thought if it looked like I was on a real run, nobody would question me. Nobody would look too close. It was a cover story, a piece of stage dressing for the most important performance of his life. His only goal was to get the tractor his one and only chance to start a new life away from that house, away from that man. And that's when the final, terrible piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The reason he'd flinched when the sheriff showed up, the reason he'd panicked at the mention of impounding the truck. "He's gonna report it stolen," Cody whispered, the words trembling with a fear that was colder than any desert night. "My stepfather, when he gets back and finds it gone, he won't call to get the truck back. He doesn't even care about the truck. He'll do it to punish me, to ruin me, to make sure I end up in a ditch, just like he promised." That's why Sheriff Brody had terrified him, because to a cop, a story is just a story. The facts are what matter, and the facts were simple. A kid with no money, no logbook, and no good answers, in possession of a commercial vehicle that didn't belong to him. If that stolen vehicle report came across the wire, Cody's life, as he knew it, was over. He wasn't just a runaway anymore. He was a felon. I sat there, the weight of his confession settling on me. The unwritten law of the road had led me here, to this moment. The simple act of stopping to help a brother on the shoulder had dragged me into a story of abuse, of desperation, of a kid trying to outrun his own past. The night was dark. The stars were beginning to burn holes in the black velvet sky, and I was faced with a choice between the simple, clean, written laws of the land and the messy, complicated, unwritten laws of being a decent human being. And I had no idea which way to turn. After Cody's story spilled out into the quiet of my cab, I sent him back to his own truck to get some sleep. Told him we'd figure it out in the morning, but I knew I wouldn't be sleeping. The night was still and cool, the kind of quiet that's supposed to bring a man peace. But for me, it just made the gears in my own mind grind louder. I sat there in the driver's seat of my Kenworth, the big steering wheel cool and solid under my hands. I looked out through the bug-spattered windshield at his rig, a dark, dead silhouette against a brilliant sea of stars, and my mind became a way station, the kind you dread pulling into, where you know you're running heavy, and the DOT officer is in a bad mood. I had to weigh the load of this kid's problem, and I knew whichever way I went, it was going to be an overweight violation of one kind or another. On one scale, the scale of the law, the answer was simple, clean. Sheriff Brody had laid it out for me plain as day. The kid was in possession of a vehicle that wasn't his. On paper, he was a thief. If I helped him, if I used my rig to tow his tractor, I wasn't a good Samaritan anymore. I was an accessory. I could lose everything. My truck, my license, the career I'd spent 40 years building. Everything I owned, everything I was, could be forfeit because of a promise a scared kid made to himself in the middle of a bad situation. It was a hell of a risk. The smart money, the professional driver's instinct for self-preservation, said to take the out Brody had given me. Call the sheriff, tell him the kid's story is fishy, and let the law sort it out. It wasn't my problem. But then I looked at the other scale, the one that weighs the unwritten laws, the trucker's code. The first rule, the one that made me pull over in the first place, is you don't pass a brother on the shoulder. But I started to wonder, what does the code really mean? Where do you draw the line? Is it just about helping a fellow licensed driver with a mechanical problem? Or is it something bigger? Is it about helping a person who's broken down, regardless of what they're driving or why? The kid wasn't a real driver. He was a refugee, and the truck was just the boat he was using to escape. Did that make him any less deserving of help? Did that void the code? I didn't have an easy answer. My mind, as it often does when I'm in a tight spot, drifted to my own family, to my kids, Michael and Clara. I tried to imagine it, one of them, young and scared, in some desperate trouble in a town they didn't know, their future hanging by a thread. What would I want a stranger to do in that situation? Would I want some old-timer to weigh the legal risks and decide my kid wasn't his problem? Or would I pray to whatever God might be listening that that stranger would see the terrified person behind the trouble, that he'd be willing to get his own hands dirty to help? The answer was so simple, so immediate and fierce, that it felt like a punch to the gut. I would want him to help, no matter what. And that's when I understood. There are two kinds of justice in this world. There's Sheriff Brody's kind. It's clean, it's simple, it's written down in black and white in a law book. It's about property and statutes and jurisdictions. It's a necessary thing. It keeps the world from falling into chaos. But its scales are calibrated to weigh facts, not truths. It couldn't weigh the fear in Cody's eyes, or the desperation that had put him on this road in the first place. Then there's the other kind of justice. It's the messy, complicated justice of the real world. The kind that isn't written down anywhere. It's the justice of the heart, of the gut. It requires you to look at a situation, a real, live, breathing human being, and make a judgment call. It requires you to get your hands dirty, to bend the rules, to maybe even break a few, because you recognize that sometimes doing the right thing and doing the legal thing are two different roads heading in opposite directions. I looked out at that dead truck one more time. I saw the kid, not as a potential thief or a legal problem, but as a reflection of my own children, as a human being who was at the absolute end of his rope. And in that moment, the scales in my mind finally settled. The decision was made. The risk was huge. The potential cost was everything. But the cost of driving away, of leaving that kid to whatever fate his stepfather and the law had in store for him, that was a debt I knew I couldn't live with. The law of the road, the real law, the one that truly matters, isn't about property. It's not about whose name is on the title of a truck. It's about people. It's about that shared, unspoken understanding that we are all just out here, trying to get down the road safely, trying to make from at home. And sometimes, the most important load you can ever haul is another person's hope. I took a deep breath, the decision settling in my gut, not with a feeling of fear, but with a strange, calm certainty. I knew what I had to do. The weigh-in was over. It was time to get back on the road. A decision made in the quiet of your own cab is one thing. Turning it into steel and diesel and motion out on the blacktop is another. Once my mind was made up, a strange kind of calm settled over me. The fear of getting caught was still there, a low hum in the back of my mind, but it was drowned out by the louder, stronger hum of purpose. I knew what I had to do. Now, it was just a matter of doing it without ending up in Sheriff Brody's county jail. First thing was a phone call. I dug out my old beat-up address book, the one with pages softened by years of grease and coffee stains, and found the number I was looking for. A fella named Sal, who runs a big independent repair shop on the outskirts of Amarillo. Sal and I go way back. I once hauled a custom-built drive shaft for him halfway across the country, a rush job I did for a handshake and a promise. I was calling in that marker. "Sal, it's Jed," I said when he picked up, his voice a gravelly bark. "I'm in a bit of a jam out on 287. I've got a kid here with a dead tractor. The engine's shot. I need a safe place to bring it. A place where a guy can get a new engine put in without a lot of questions being asked." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Sal was a smart man. He knew a favor called in at 2 in the morning wasn't about a simple repair. "How much of a jam we talkin', Jed?" he asked. "The kind of jam where the local law is already sniffing around, but the kid needs a break more than he needs a bus ticket," I said. Another pause, longer this time. Then, a sigh. "All right. You know the back lot. Leave it by the fence behind the stacks of old tires. I'll be there when the sun comes up. Don't bring any trouble to my door that I can't handle." "You won't hear a peep," I promised, and that was that. The first piece was in place. I walked over to Cody's truck and laid out the plan for him. His eyes, which had been dull with despair, slowly lit up with a flicker of something I hadn't seen in them before. A fragile, desperate hope. "We're not taking the whole rig," I told him, my voice low and firm. "That trailer is a liability. It's got his name on it, and it's a sealed load. If a cop pulls us over, it's a can of worms we can't open. We're leaving it here. We're just taking the tractor. It's your one and only asset, your one chance to start over. The rest of this is his problem now." I went to my toolbox and pulled out a heavy-duty pair of bolt cutters. The steel jaws were nearly 3 feet long, a tool designed for one purpose: to break things that aren't meant to be broken. I handed them to Cody. The weight of them in his hands seemed to surprise him. "Whatever's in that trailer," I said, looking him straight in the eye, "it's just junk. It's a part of the life you're leaving behind. The tractor is your future. That trailer is his. You need to cut it loose." He walked to the back of the trailer, the bolt cutters feeling like an extension of his own will. He slid the jaws over the thick steel of the bolt seal. He hesitated for a second, a final moment of doubt. Then he squeezed. The muscles in his arms bunched up, and with a loud, sharp snap times that echoed in the night, the seal broke and fell to the ground. It was more than just a piece of metal. It was a symbolic act, a severing of the final tie to his old life. He looked at the broken seal on the ground, then back at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of a real, genuine smile on his face. Now came the hard part, the dangerous part. We unhitched his tractor from with the trailer, dropping the landing gear and pulling the fifth wheel. Then came the chain up. We worked in the harsh, sterile glare of my headlights, our shadows dancing like giants on the pavement. I backed my Kenworth up to his dead Freightliner, the bumpers just inches apart. The chains were thick, heavy links of hardened steel, each one weighing a good 20 pounds. We wrapped them around his frame, then mine, the metal clanking and groaning in the quiet. It's a heavy, dangerous job. One slip, one moment of inattention, and you can lose a hand. But we worked together, a silent, efficient team. We were no longer a Samaritan and a stray. We were partners in a conspiracy, bound together by a shared risk and a set of heavy steel chains. Finally, it was done. The two tractors were shackled together, my live engine ready to pull his dead one. We took one last look at the trailer, sitting there alone on the shoulder of the highway, a dark, silent monument to a problem we were leaving for someone else to solve. It looked like a tombstone. As I climbed into my cab and put the old girl in gear, the engine straining against the new, immense weight, it felt like we were pulling away from a gravesite. We were leaving a part of Cody's old life back there in the Texas dust, and hoping like hell that the ghost of it wouldn't follow us down the road. Pulling that dead Freightliner behind my Kenworth was like trying to run a marathon with another man on my back. Every gear shift was a negotiation. Every slight incline was a mountain. The 100 miles to Amarillo were, without a doubt, the slowest, most nerve-wracking 100 miles of my entire life. My big cat engine, usually a smooth, deep-throated beast, groaned and complained under the strain of pulling 20 tons of dead weight. The whole rig shuddered and vibrated, a constant, violent tremor that traveled up through the floorboards and into the base of my skull. It was a brutal, ugly way to drive, but the Strain on the engine was nothing compared to the strain on my nerves. Cody sat in the passenger seat, silent and pale, his job to steer his dead truck in our wake. My job was to drive and to watch the mirrors. My eyes were glued to them, scanning, searching, expecting at any moment to see that terrible, familiar bloom of red and blue lights flashing in the darkness behind us. Every pair of headlights that appeared on the horizon sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through my system. My heart hammered against my ribs, and my hands tightened on the wheel. Was this it? Was this the moment the whole dangerous, stupid, righteous plan came crashing down? Each time, the headlights would belong to a four-wheeler or another trucker, passing us with a wide, curious berth. And each time, I'd let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. We rolled into the outskirts of Amarillo just as the eastern sky was beginning to turn from a deep, star-filled indigo to a pale, hopeful gray. The city was still asleep, the streets empty and quiet. We were a two-headed mechanical monster, clanking and groaning our way through the sleeping town, and I felt as conspicuous as a circus parade. I navigated us to Sal's shop, a sprawling, chaotic yard of automotive parts and half-disassembled trucks on the far west side of town. It was our safe harbor. Sal was there, just as he'd promised. He was a small, wiry man with grease permanently etched into the lines of his hands, and he was standing by the open gate of his back lot, a steaming mug of coffee in his hand. He watched us pull in, his expression unreadable in the pre-dawn gloom. He didn't say a word as we unchained the two tractors, our movement slow and clumsy with exhaustion. When we were done, he just took a slow walk around Cody's rig, his expert eyes taking in the cracked block, the worn tires, the general air of neglect. Then he looked at Cody, a long, hard, assessing look. Then he looked at me. He didn't ask for the story. He didn't need to. He'd been in this business long enough to know how to read between the lines. He just nodded, a single, slow nod of understanding. That was all that passed between us. "I've got a used Cummins block I can drop in her," he said, his voice a low gravel. "It'll take me a few days. It won't be cheap." I knew that. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet, taking out a thick fold of the cash I always keep tucked away for emergencies. I guess this qualified. I handed a stack of $100 bills to Sal. "This is for the initial look-see," I said, "and a down payment on the engine. Get him started right." Then I turned to Cody. He was just standing there, looking at the money changing hands, his face a mixture of shock and disbelief and a shame so profound it was painful to see. I took out a pen and tore a corner off a page of my logbook, scribbling my name and phone number on it. "This isn't a gift," and told him, my voice firm but not unkind. I pressed the piece of paper into his hand. "This is a loan. When you get to California, when you get your feet under you and this rig is earning again, you call this number and you pay me back. We clear?" He just stared at the money in Sal's hand, then at the scrap of paper in his own, and all he could do was nod, his throat too thick with emotion to speak. My part was done. I shook Sal's hand, gave Cody a solid clap on the shoulder, and climbed back into my own rig. My Kenworth felt impossibly light and powerful now, freed from her burden. As I pulled out of Sal's yard and pointed her west, back toward the interstate, I glanced in my rear-view mirror, and I saw it. About a half-mile back, sitting at a quiet intersection, was a familiar vehicle, a tan county cruiser. It was Sheriff Brody. He wasn't following me. He was just watching. And as I passed, I saw him turn his cruiser around and head back east, back toward the highway, back toward the abandoned trailer he surely knew he would find sitting on the shoulder like a steel orphan. He'd known. The whole time, he must have known. He could have stopped us at any point, but he hadn't. He'd seen the same things I had, the desperation, the fear, the story that was about more than just a truck. And in his own way, in the quiet, weary justice of a small-town sheriff, he had made his own choice. He had given the kid a head start. Maybe he understood too. The sun was coming up now, a brilliant, clean sunrise that set the Texas plains on fire. The road ahead was empty and wide open. I took a deep breath, the air in the cab feeling clean and light. I'd bent the law, and I'd broken my schedule all to hell. I was out a good chunk of money, with only a kid's promise that I'd ever see it again. By all objective measures, it was a bad piece of business. But as I rolled down that empty highway, the rising sun warm on my face, I felt good. I realized that the trucker's code, the real one, isn't just about helping a guy with a busted engine. Sometimes, it's about recognizing that the engine isn't the only thing that's broken. Sometimes it's about giving a person just enough of a tow to get them to a place where they can finally start fixing themselves. And that, well, that's a debt you can't ever fully collect on, and maybe you're not supposed to.